I'm Nancy Cordes, and welcome to Aspen Unplugged. Bob Schieffer is out in Colorado this week to attend the Aspen Ideas Festival, and we thought we'd take you up to the mountains for this special edition of Washington Unplugged. As part of the program, Bob sat down with Education Secretary Arne Duncan. Let's go to Bob.
You have talked about standards. You're not really a fan of No Child Left Behind in its current form. Just talk about where you think standards ought to be. Are they high enough, or are they too high?
Well, let me even start one step before that. The one thing I will always give the previous administration great credit for is really shining a spotlight on the achievement gap. This idea of disaggregating data and talking about the horrendous disparities in outcomes between white children and African American and Latino children. As a country, we used to sweep that achievement gap under the rug. It was uncomfortable to talk about. And the focus on disaggregating data, the focus on closing that achievement gap is hugely important. We're never going to walk away from that. What No Child Left Behind, I think, got fundamentally wrong on the standards side is it allowed 50 states to do their own thing. So 50 states, 50 different goalposts, 50 different bars, and the vast majority, the overwhelming majority, not surprisingly, got dummied down due to political pressure. And in many states, including the state that I'm from, Illinois, I actually think we're lying to children. And let me explain why I say that. If a child or a parent is told that they are, quote unquote, meeting this standard, the logical assumption is that they're going to do okay, that they're on track to be successful. But in far too many places around the country, children that are, quote unquote, meeting a standard are barely able to graduate from high school and are totally inadequately prepared to go to a competitive university, let alone graduate. So that has to change. We have to talk about college-ready, career-ready, common, internationally benchmarked standards. And this is really an idea. It used to be the third rail, but it's an idea whose time has come. The unions are on board with this. The business community has been begging for this for a long time. We've had 46 states literally sign on the dotted line and commit to working on this together. The state school chiefs are working on this. So you have government, you have business, you have the unions, the private sector. Everyone's saying what we're doing isn't good enough for children. We have to stop lying. We have to stop dumbing things down. Let's raise the bar and hold ourselves accountable for getting there.
So, how will you do this, though? Are you going to propose new legislation? Where do you go from here?
Well, I think where this dies is if this is federal standards, it dies. If this is national, this is being led at the local level. This is being led by great governors and great school chiefs. And sometimes you lead from the front, sometimes you cheerlead from the sidelines. And I'm waving the pom-poms on this one. This is really being led at the state, at the local level, which is where it needs to come from. And so we're going to continue to support it. We're going to use part of the race to the top money, $5 billion. We're going to use $350 million to help create great assessments behind these standards. But this is being driven by people who understand what they're doing in their states for children is not good enough educationally and is not good long-term economically. Leadership has to come at the local level on this push.
But you're prepared to go in and pressure them into doing this. I mean, there will be carrots and sticks here, won't there?
We're encouraging them, absolutely.
Yeah. But how? I mean, to make that meaningful, how will you do that?
Well, we have, on top of the $100 billion, we have $5 billion in discretionary resources. And this is, again, extraordinary. I talked to Secretary Page. I think he had 17 million. We have 5 billion. And we're calling this the Race to the Top Fund. And we're going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in states that are willing to lead the country where we need to go. And there's a series of reform items that we can walk through that if states are willing to commit to those, we want to partner with them. And so we have significant carrots on the table, unprecedented carrots, to work with states that want to break with the status quo and take the country where I'm convinced we have to go.
You closed schools that weren't good schools in Chicago. Is that part of your plan? I mean, I'd like to talk to you about some of these turnarounds and how you did that.
Yeah, and big picture, we have about 95,000 schools in the country, call it 100,000. Top schools in the country are the best in the world. We can be absolutely proud. We should be replicating, learning from them, doing everything we can to share those best practices. We have a set of schools in the middle that aren't where they need to be, but they're improving every year. We need to continue to encourage that and help those teachers continue to improve. But what we're trying to push the country to think about is let's not think about the 99%. Let's think about the 1% at the bottom. Let's take 1,000 schools a year. These are schools that are dropout factories, where 60, 65, 70% of students are dropping out each year. These are schools where not just absolute test scores are low, but I'm a big believer in looking at gain and growth and where that growth is going worse, so students are falling further and further behind. And I'm just convinced that when those situations happen, we as educators, we actually start to perpetuate poverty and we start to perpetuate social failure. So about 6 years ago in Chicago, we closed 3 schools for academic failure. And it was probably the hardest thing we ever did and about killed us. We came back, same children, same buildings, same socioeconomic challenges, same communities, different adults, different expectations, different belief of what's possible. One of those schools in about the 3rd year of the turnaround became the highest performing, highest growth school in the state. It's places where students are barely achieving are performing 2 or 3 times better. So I know what's possible. Doesn't matter how poor children are, doesn't matter how dysfunctional the families. When we give them real opportunities, real long-term support, have the highest of expectations, students can do well. So I'm trying to take the lessons we learned there, and we went from closing 3 to closing to 20, 25 a year and opening new schools every single year. There's some places you can improve. There's some places you just have to start fresh. Investing more in a dysfunctional situation, more money is not going to get us where we need to go.
Well, in some of those you talked about, you moved everybody out, right?
Yes.
I mean, all the teachers, the faculty, the administrators. And how do you do that? I mean, that sounds good. Okay, let's get rid of all the bad teachers, but it's a little harder than that, isn't it?
Well, and to be clear, I never blamed anyone. I said, if you want to blame anyone, blame me. And let me be clear, in every failing dysfunctional school, there are some good teachers. There are some great teachers. There simply isn't enough. There isn't a large enough critical mass. And so there are phenomenal teachers who want this kind of challenge, who want to come into the toughest communities, who want to make a difference, who want to build a culture from the ground up. And we need to continue to recruit more great teachers, more great principals who are willing to do the toughest work in education today, which is turning around failing schools. But when we do it, and we do it with a real sense of urgency, we can dramatically change the outcomes for children and change their life chances forever.
And it's not all work out in Aspen. Bob also had some laughs with comedian Louis Black.
We see a lot about religion and politics now. What is your view of the separation of the church and statesmen?
You live around it. And if you live around D.C., there seems to be this thing that part of what you have to do to run America is you got to have a church. We're a temple, or wherever it is, you better go. Better show up. When do you go on Sunday? You're working Sunday.
I have to work, but
yeah,
I have an excuse.
Yeah, what do you send a note?
Yes.
Because but I find it astonishing. I don't care. I have never cared. Why do we care? I mean, if there's any lesson to be learned from the Bush administration, I mean, one of the, okay, the lesson, an important lesson is you don't, when you find yourself in a voting booth thinking, I'm going to vote for this person because I believe they're religious and they have a strong faith in God, you better take 10 seconds to think it out and be sure that God has faith in that person. It's a two-way street.
This holiday weekend, across America, people will watch spectacular fireworks shows. On the National Mall Saturday, up to 500,000 people are expected to take in a highly anticipated 17-minute show. Our digital journalist, Fernando Suarez, has taken an exclusive look at the preparations for this annual tradition.
12,000 pounds of explosives sit inside this truck, parked near the nation's capital. It's heavily guarded 24 hours a day in a location we cannot reveal. It was brought here by this Tennessee-based pyrotechnics crew, charged with putting on the annual 4th of July fire show on the National Mall.
Just to get a show like this is kind of bragging rights for the fireworks industry.
James Jones and his team work around the clock for a 17-minute show with one hefty price tag.
In 10 days that we, with the 7 guys that we have, we end up, using about probably $150,000 in fireworks. The total shows, I think, $199,000 this year.
This is our command central.
Across the river in Virginia is the technical nerve center of Don's Johns, the 4th of July's largest supplier of portable toilets.
We deliver in payloads of 200, which takes about 8 trucks.
In fact, 700 latrines are headed to the National Mall, each with a 21st century flourish.
Each of those is zapped with a little handheld computer that reads a serial number and then tracks the exact latitude and longitude that the unit was located. So anytime the unit's moved, we know about it.
That's right, GPS tracking for porta potties. Harold says the technology gives Don Johns the ability to create a virtual view of the entire event.
Even though it's just a porta potty, it's of crucial need to the thousands of people that'll be on the mall.
Back here in Washington, massive crowds are expected to turn up this year, and with that, serious security concerns, a responsibility that falls squarely on the shoulders of the U.S. Park Police. And that happens to mean hundreds of hooves hitting the pavement to control crowds. But before these horses are cleared to work, they'll need this guy's seal of approval. Arvin Reynolds, the Park Police's blacksmith.
The old adage is no shoe, no horse, no foot, no horse.
But having hooves on the ground is just one line of defense for the Park Police.
It's game day. We know we have to gear up.
That means hours in the air for veteran pilot Ken Burchell, monitoring crowd movements, even responding to potential disasters.
4th of July is a little different in that we have our normal day-to-day missions, and then this added, the added workload of having an additional city move into the middle of the city.
But for James Jones, the extra effort is more than worth it.
It's a rush, it really is. I mean, we shoot 584 shells in 1 minute of the finale. I mean, it's loud, it's crazy. It's an overall rush, really.
Fernando Suarez, CBS News, Washington.
And that's Washington Unplugged. Thanks for watching. Have a safe holiday weekend, and we'll see you back here at 12:30 p.m. Monday on CBSNews.com. I'm Nancy Cordes.